So when they
crack these districts, and black voters in South Carolina,
they can still vote
Tennessee,
wherever they want. You just don't draw the lines based on race, which is racist.
You're being purposefully obtuse, and your viewers can see
You're
that
being purposely
because
obtuse.
they know exactly what it means when.
I've been sitting with this clip for a minute, and honestly, the level of gaslighting is off the charts. We're looking at a heated segment from Katie Pavlich tonight where she brings on Bryan Tyler Cohen to discuss the Supreme Court's recent decision to gut race-based congressional maps. It is truly wild to watch Pavlich attempt to frame the dismantling of the Voting Rights Act as some kind of victory for desegregation. Bryan didn't let her get away with it, though. He stepped right into the line of fire to explain exactly how cracking these districts in the South dilutes the voting power of Black and brown communities. This isn't just about lines on a map. It's a calculated, mid-cycle power grab designed to manufacture a GOP majority for 2028 by making sure minority voices are effectively silenced. The exchange gets incredibly tense when Bryan calls out the total hypocrisy of the right, claiming to hate gerrymandering while simultaneously blocking every effort to ban it nationwide. You're watching Floor Leader Insider, and we are not letting these narratives go unchallenged. If you want the real breakdown on how our democracy is being reshaped behind the scenes, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join the community. Let's dive right into it.
Bryan Tyler Cohen, progressive YouTuber. Bryan, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. So can you just explain to me how Democrats who are just calling to change Virginia's map are selectively being outraged about the Supreme Court ruling?
This Supreme Court ruling is basically rolling back the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And I think the fact that you can see Democrats applaud what happened in Virginia does not negate the outrage, the virtuous outrage over what happened at the Supreme Court. When Democrats are applauding what happened in Virginia, it is in response to a cycle that was started off, that was sparked off by Donald Trump deciding that he was owed 5 seats, entitled to 5 seats in Texas, and yet no Republicans had any issue with that. They seem to just decide that if Donald Trump calls for 5 seats in Texas, that there should be no response from Democrats. In fact, I don't remember you saying anything about there being anything wrong with what was happening in Texas. So when Democrats are applauding action, a response in California, in Virginia, that is because Republicans decided to engage in this mid-cycle redistricting and push back against this entitlement that Trump felt in the aftermath of Texas.
Well, first of all, in Texas, the redistricting was legal under their system, and it's still proportional. Let me finish, Bryan. It was still legal, and it's still proportional to the presidential election results far more than what we've seen by Democrats way before Texas ever decided to do something. The Voting Rights Act.
That's irrelevant.
That's irrelevant. You don't get to say
this is a better.
Brian, there's nothing in the Voting Rights Act that says you can draw districts based on race, which is exactly what Democrats have been doing in order to maintain political power in Washington. I want to go back to these maps because you say Texas started it. Well, New England, there are 0 seats for Republican representation on Capitol Hill, despite 40% of voters in New England voting for President Trump in the last presidential election. If you look at Virginia and the way that it was, 6-4, now it's going to be 10-1. They had to draw this weird lobster in the middle where you have all of Northern Virginia, which is very heavily white, by the way, disenfranchising voters down in Southern Virginia. There are districts now that voted 75% for Donald Trump. They're now going to be represented by Northern Virginia. They didn't vote for that. You also have Illinois, with 14 Democratic seats, 3 Republicans, when 30+% of Illinois voted for Donald Trump. So you tell me, looking at these maps, how that is a fair representation for Republican voters in states like Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, et cetera.
Right, and we can play the same game in South Carolina, in Alabama, in Louisiana, in Georgia, in Florida, in Texas. You conspicuously left all of those out, but that really raises the question here that because gerrymandering is happening everywhere, shouldn't Republicans support a nationwide ban on gerrymandering? And yet when that was put forward in 2020... Yes.
The most
in fact,
gerrymandered seats in America are not from Republicans, as we just showed on the maps. I want to ask you this question.
Take a look at. Wait, hold on. Let me respond to what you just said. First of all, take a look at Dan Crenshaw's previous district, and then tell me that gerrymandering doesn't exist in these Republican states. But second of all, every single Republican voted against the 2021 Freedom to Vote Act. Every single Democrat voted in favor of it. That would have banned partisan gerrymandering nationwide. Republicans right now have full control of government.
We all
House,
know
Senate,
that the
White
language
House.
of that benefited
There are no
Democrats and
Republicans
did
putting
not
forward
do what the
legislation.
title
Excuse
said.
me. Let me just finish what I'm just saying. There's no legislation being put forward to ban gerrymandering nationwide. So you can, if you think it's such a scourge that you can point to New England and say that there are no Republican representatives, Republicans have the power right now to fix it, but they don't because they know that they benefit from it.
And Democrats are the ones who've been doing this.
Democrats don't have control of government right now. Republicans do.
I want to ask you this.
Do you support it nationwide?
I support the Supreme Court ruling because I don't believe in drawing congressional districts based on race because that's racist. Can Democrats win?
Because you want.
I have a question.
Wait.
Brian, do you believe that Democrats can win?
You think it's racist to have representation?
The Supreme Court just desegregated
you
the
think
South.
having one
Democrats
district
in the South were
in South
segregating
Carolina.
the South by having race-based congressional districts, which the Supreme Court just ruled against. That's what just happened.
So
Democrats
when they
apparently
crack
can't
these
win
districts,
elections unless they draw districts
these
based on race. Whether they can't win elections because people are fleeing blue states for red states, and they can't win elections because in the census they are counting illegal aliens as part of congressional districts, which Democrats are opposed to taking out of that because they need them for congressional representation. So when they
crack these districts, when they crack these districts, and black voters in South Carolina,
they can still vote
Tennessee,
wherever they want. You just don't draw the lines based on race, which is racist.
They're
desegregating the South.
You're being purposefully obtuse, and your viewers can see that.
You're being purposely
because
obtuse.
They know exactly what it means when you crack a district from a jurisdiction where there are overwhelmingly black or brown voters, and now all of a sudden those districts are cracked into 3 other districts so that their voting power is diluted. This is exactly the impetus.
I know that George Wallace and Joe Biden were against desegregation
This was exactly the impetus for the Voting Rights Act of 1965. This was exactly the impetus for the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
Bryan Tyler Cohen, thank you. Talk to you soon.
Looking at this debate, I'm struck by how Pavlich tries to use the language of the civil rights movement to essentially gut it. It's a classic move. Take a word like racism and strip it of all historical context until it just means noticing that black people exist. Bryan Tyler Cohen was 100% right to call her out for being purposefully obtuse. When she tries to argue that drawing districts to ensure minority representation is segregated, she's ignoring the last 150 years of American history. You don't desegregate the South by making sure black voters are spread so thin across white majority districts that they can never elect a candidate of their choice. That's not desegregation, that's a political erasure. What Bryan was trying to get her to acknowledge and what she refused to see is the mechanical reality of cracking. This isn't just about partisan vibes, it's a math problem used as a weapon. If you have a concentrated community that shares economic and social interests, and you slice them into 3 different pieces, you've effectively stolen their seat at the table. The GOP is terrified of a fair fight, which is why they've turned to the courts to do what they can't do at the ballot box. Manage the electorate. And let's talk about that 2021 Freedom to Vote Act point Bryan brought up. That is the ultimate gotcha that Pavlich had no answer for. She wants to complain about lobster-shaped districts in Virginia or the lack of GOP seats in New England, but when Democrats put a bill on the floor to ban partisan gerrymandering nationwide, every single Republican walked away. They don't want a fair map. They want a map they can manipulate. It's pure projection. They cry about the scourge of gerrymandering only when they aren't the ones holding the pen. The broader institutional threat here is what really keeps me up at night. We have a Supreme Court that seems determined to treat the Voting Rights Act like a suggestion, rather than the law of the land. By rolling back these protections, they are signaling to state legislatures that it's open season on minority voting blocks. This is a coordinated, multi-front assault on the very idea of a multi-ethnic democracy. If we lose the ability to draw maps that reflect the actual makeup of this country, we lose the representative part of our representative democracy. Bryan Tyler Cohen stood his ground against a tidal wave of bad faith arguments, and he did it with the kind of intellectual clarity we need more of. We cannot allow the right to redefine the terms of the debate so that protecting the right to vote is seen as racist, while the systematic dilution of power is seen as fairness. This isn't a game of both sides are doing it, one side is trying to protect the integrity of the vote, and the other is trying to gerrymander their way into permanent minority rule. We have to see this for what it is, a desperate attempt by a shrinking movement to hold on to power by any means necessary. The lines we draw today will determine the future of this country for the next decade, and we can't afford to let them be drawn in the dark. I really appreciate you guys sticking around for this deep dive. It's conversations like these that remind us why we have to stay vigilant and informed. Thanks for watching Floor Leader Insider. Keep demanding the truth, and I'll catch you in the next video.